But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 275. Okay, I don't know why it did that. Sorry guys, I think those of you watching Rumble may be looking at the wrong title because it reverted my title. Hopefully it didn't revert everything else because that would suck. Anyway, sorry. The title is This Feminist Narrative Mangles Potential Female Accountability. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. And tonight we're going to learn how feminist women have declared men responsible for women's bodily integrity. But before we get into that, we've got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. Except this week, when it wouldn't let me post the article, so you'll have to see the links for the show and everything. If they're not in the low bar, you'll have to check us out on Patreon. And I do believe the link to the Patreon should be in the low bar. And so, I don't know what's going on with WordPress. Apparently it doesn't like us today, but there you go.
WordPress doesn't like anyone, ever.
Yeah.
WordPress.
Every blogging platform that I've been on has had issues like this, where, like, they update and all of a sudden something is wrong with every past blog you posted, or you can't log in, or this or that. And it's like, all this website has to do is let you post text and images in a manner that is attractive to the reader and easily walked through by the reader's eyes. That's all it has to do. It's not that complicated. It's not like back in the day when if you wanted to publish something, you had to type it up, you had to print the pictures, you had to use a 100-line screen to make sure that you weren't getting big blotchy black spots and white spots. A 100-line screen had little dots, and so you had areas of black and white basically on there that helped it create that dot pattern you see in old newspapers, right? And then you had to take by hand, you had to cut out everything and paste it onto another page the size of your publication, or at least the size of the size that you wanted to photograph to publish your publication. And you had tape that you had to use to put lines in between everything, like everything was done by hand. And then you had to send it to the printer, and they would photograph it, and they would print your pages. And then somebody had to fold them together, and then it would be distributed if it was a newspaper. Or if it was pages, there was more to it than that. There was binding that had to take place. And all of that, that's complicated. I can see where all kinds of shit can go wrong with that. But it drives me nuts when it goes wrong with blogging websites, because what the hell? It doesn't have to be that complicated. But anyway, there's my little rant. And now you know I've been publishing for a long time. Because I used to do paste up when I worked at the newspaper in my hometown when I was growing up. So, anyway, all of that aside, sorry there's no blog post. There is a Patreon post. It has everything the blog post would have had in it. And it's just not on the blog. But to the item that we're dealing with today, we're told that women have a right to control over their own bodies. And I remember from multiple classes beginning in elementary health school, or school health class, to, high school biology, going into college. I took anatomy and physiology. In every course I took, the reproductive system is part of the body. Like, I learned that in every course. From the simple way to learn it to the most complex, where you had to learn all the different parts and where the blood vessels were and what the names of the nerves were and all that shit. It's still all part of the body. So if you have control over your own body, that includes your reproductive system. That's the argument that feminists make when they want to have an abortion. But the whole thing falls apart when they start talking about who is responsible for controlling a woman's body. And that's basically what we're going to read about today, right? From stem to stern, it should be hers to control. Control necessarily requires one to take charge, right? That's responsibility, right? You would think?
Well, yeah. I mean, unless a certain Dr. Fauci tells you that you must what you need to do with your body, then it's, oh my God, yes, give me more, daddy government, daddy science.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And of course, you have to take measures that absolutely do not help you exercise any control whatsoever, because politics. But yeah, and they're looking at bringing that back, and I've been posting about that a little bit. There are some things about those N95 masks that people should know before they put them on their face. And we should all be holding the producers of personal protective equipment to account, because there are some places where, you need that to keep dust out of your lungs, and it's got nasty stuff. There's an article about that. So there you go. This idea of having control over your own body only applies to abortion, and it doesn't come with responsibility. So the title of our article, this article, by the way, and the accompanying book are a year old. They're not new. Well, they're more than 8 months old. This is from like October, so it's almost a year, not quite. And this woman wrote this book. She wrote a Twitter thread about men being responsible for pregnancy and not women. And it just resonated with women all over. And it trended, and now it's the only argument feminists make when they're talking about any reproductive issues at all. Whether it's custody, child support, parental alienation, paternal surrender, doesn't matter. This is the argument they turn to. So I thought, you know what, we really need to dig into this woman. And I'm not going to read the book. She wrote a book based on a stupid... Yeah, I know. She wrote the book based on a stupid Twitter thread. I should do that. I have some Twitter threads I could turn into a book, I'm sure.
Oh my God. Yes, you could.
But
holy shit. You could take these bitches to class for real.
I have Twitter threads that are books.
Yes, you do.
You could write a 20-volume encyclopedia from your tweet.
I probably could. And this is like, she made money on this, so maybe, you know, if HBR published it, then HBR could make money on this. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah. So this is where this argument comes from. Men are 100% responsible for unwanted pregnancies. Gabrielle Blair on her viral tweet turned book. Quote, "Ejaculate responsibly." That's the name of the book. And it's titled "Ejaculate Responsibly: A Whole New Way to Think About Abortion." And the quote at the top is, "I'd like to see the conversation shift from women's bodies," which is like the entire conversation about abortion has been about women's bodies, and the right is based on discussion of women's bodies, so that's interesting, "to what men can do to prevent pregnancy," said Gabrielle Blair, author of Ejaculate Responsibly: A Whole New Way to Think About Abortion.
Oh, is she meaning that she would like to fund some new research into more ways that men have to be able to prevent pregnancy? Would she like to invest in Vasogel and all these, you know, the other ones that are coming out? Is that what she's saying? Because hey, I'm all for that.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
Yeah, but I gather that's not really what she's saying. It's what she's saying is how to make men responsible for the choices that I wasn't brave enough to make for myself.
Yeah. Well, and you think about it. Women have a shitload of choices. Like you start women's first choice is when we say no, we're backed by law. In every country in the world. There are rape laws in every country in the world. So every country in the world puts the full force of government authority behind our no. It's not true for men. In Mike's country, for instance, there's law that criminalizes not respecting a man's no. But there's also policy written into domestic violence law that tells the police to not believe men as quickly as women, right? And then at the same time, you know, if a woman does that in the UK, she doesn't get labeled a rapist. A man will if he does it, but a woman does not face the consequence of being labeled a rapist for refusing to respect a man's no. She's just labeled a sexual assailant. And in the United States, we thought, because feminists told us, and they've been telling us since 2012, that they had fixed that problem, and that in the United States, a woman who raped a man would be labeled a rapist under rape law. But last year, the Ohio Supreme Court said no. And I'm still working on the letter that I'm sending to my representatives in regard to that. But I think it's pretty much ready to go. I haven't had any further input, but I also haven't contacted the two organizations that I would like to have somebody read it over from and just double check and make sure I haven't left anything out or said anything wrong. So that's what happens when you get sick as a dog. I was sick as a dog for like a whole month, and am now getting back on the horse. But yeah, here's her argument, or here's her interview, I guess. And this is Ms. Magazine, just a reminder. This is the magazine that published the researcher who determined that sexual violence against men is not as big of a deal as sexual violence against women, right? So we get a bigger no than men get. We get more types of birth control if we say yes. And of course, we're allowed to be picky. And if we're picky, our pickiness is legitimized in media to the degree that if we're criticized for it by anybody, they get called extremists. If men are picky, they get shamed for it.
Bear in mind, there's no form of birth control available to men unilaterally. Unless you count a vasectomy as birth control, but it's not. It's just switching the whole tube system off.
Right.
Control is like being able to easily switch it on and off like you can with the pill.
It's not as easily reversible as feminists like to say either.
And condoms are not unilateral, hence the use of the word unilateral. There's nothing stopping a woman from demanding that a man wears a condom. Unless he's going to straight up rape her, and yeah, I think we're all against that. Yeah. I think we can all lock arms and go, don't rape.
Yeah, pretty much everybody except rapists agrees with us on that. But yeah.
And the UK government, when it comes to women raping men, they don't even get labelled sexual assailants, by the way, unless the man has a really good lawyer.
Yeah,
they just get labelled as nice.
Yeah, well, the tough part is, if sex happens and the woman says, I didn't consent, that gets defined as rape. If sex happens and the man says, I didn't consent, people start questioning, are you just trying to get out of parenthood? Are you just mad at her? What is the reason that you didn't? Are you gay? What if he is? What if he is, right? Does it only become rape if a woman rapes a gay man? Because he's clearly not going to want it. But yeah, I mean,
Can you get hard? There's no such thing. You can't get hard unless you're sexually aroused. Who ever heard of a nervous erection?
Yeah, or even just the fact that it's an autonomic reaction, or response, not a conscious one. But yeah, your brain can interfere with it. But not as well as you'd like. You don't have control necessarily, a whole lot of control over your brain interfering with it, so much as it can be a problem, your brain interfering with it. But yeah, all of that advantages women in terms of reproductive control. We have every advantage to prevent conception in the first place. And in addition, when we talk about birth control, we're gonna really briefly. I'm not gonna make the claim that Pearl Davis makes about women having 40 some types of birth control, because I think she's talking different brand names. But there's at least 11, right? There are multiple barrier methods. There are multiple types or ways to use spermicide. And then there are different hormonal methods. And then, I want to make sure I say this right, IUD, intrauterine devices. I always want to call them IEDs, which would prevent pregnancy. But that could be an explosive issue. But in any case, we have so many different ways to block semen from meeting up with the egg, still alive, right? And then of course there's also like women can engage in oral, women can engage in anal. Those don't get you pregnant. Like if you get pregnant from anal sex, there is a problem. Also, your kid's probably going to be a little shit. But in any case, all that going into this tells me that they want to ignore all of it, right? They want to ignore, you could be on the pill and still use spermicide. You can be on the pill and still use a barrier method. You can be on the pill, use a barrier method and spermicide. Or instead of the pill, you can take the shot. You can take an implant. There's an implant that goes in your arm. There's a ring that goes around your cervix. Both of those are hormonal. You could have an IUD that it isn't hormonal and use hormonal birth control and use spermicide and a barrier, and you could still say, I'm still not doing this if you don't use a condom. So a woman can insist on up to like 5 different types of birth control methods. And if you can say, well, each one of those is only 95 to 99% effective. Well, yeah, it has a 5% chance at best of getting through the first one. All right. And if it gets through the first one, then it only has a 5% chance of getting through the second one. If you give them all 95% effectiveness, some of them are more, right? So if you take that, that's 5% of 5%. And then each barrier that you add to pregnancy makes it that much harder for it to get through, until you get to the point where the statistical likelihood of pregnancy becomes negligible. And the last likelihood is you're only fertile for part of the month. So even if you're gambling and you're not paying attention, you only have a 20% chance of conceiving without birth control. So it's ludicrous for women to say they can't present pregnancy, right? It's just absolutely ludicrous. But this is the argument. As the political landscape continues to regress, and I like that they just automatically say, it's regressing. It's time to rethink how we talk about abortion. Gabrielle Blair, a Mormon woman, I had to read that a couple of times, honestly, before I realized it was about her religion and not her, it's not her mental capacity. And it says Mormon, but sometimes it's just fun to lose your letters. A Mormon
and
woman.
Contrary to popular belief, not all Mormons are morons.
No, but all abortion advocates are. Not really, but they have been fooled. They've been conned. And mother of 6. So she does know how pregnancy happens. She does know how a woman's body works, at least. Argues that the onus of preventing unwanted pregnancies should fall on those who cause them. Men.
God damn it.
Oh, wow.
God damn it. God damn it. God damn it. It's absurd on its face, right? Because we all know how the sex thing works, right? We all know how it works.
Yes, the knock-up fairy goes down the street and whacks you with his magic wand.
Yeah, no,
of pregnancy.
God damn it!
Right in the pooter.
This is. Oh my god! It hurts. It hurts me. Now, I think maybe this should be a good time to tell the story that I have. It's Lauren story time.
Oh, good.
So just yesterday, I was talking to a coworker. Now, he's maybe 22, 23, young kid, right? And at first, my first impression of him was that he's just a fuck around. He doesn't really want to work. He's not really here. He just wants a paycheck. He's not really serious about life, yada, yada. But then I had more conversations with him, and he's like, yeah, I got this girl, blah, 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 but she doesn't want to settle down. She doesn't know if I'm right for her. And so fast forward, and now she's gone. He's like, yeah, I'm going back to church, and, I'm not dealing with her anymore. And I really want to have like a family. I want to get my life together and yada, yada. All right. Fast forward till today or yesterday. He comes and tells me, he goes, guess what? I said, what? He goes, I'm going to Austin to see a girl. I said, oh, shit. Here we go. Mm-hmm. Mister, I want to focus on my life and settle down. Now here he is chasing some more tail. I'm going to Austin to see this girl. Nah, I really like her. I trust her. You know, she knows that I'm up here and she's down there and I'm doing her thing and she's doing her thing. So she doesn't really want like a clingy thing. I said, you better wrap it up. He goes, nah, but see. And here come the excuse. Nah, but it just feels good, right? But I trust her. Oh, shit. Famous last words. And I just laid into him. I said, listen, I don't care how much you trust her. Women lie. No, but she got that alarm on her phone that tells her every day that she should take her birth control. Okay, but are you watching her take it? Oh, you got a point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Big point.
Yes. So, in a sense, I will concede to the fact that there are men out there that are irresponsible with their own procreation, right? They're just irresponsible with their sperm. I told them, every time you fuck her, there's a billion blank checks you're just sending out, right? Like, why would you do that when you're at this stage in your life? You're not anywhere near settled. You know what I mean? You don't have a career. You're still in school. Why would you go and do that? Oh, no, you're right. Okay, all right. I know I'm right, but y'all don't listen to me.
Yeah, this is the thing. We tell women, if you don't want to be complaining and using the term deadbeat dad, which I don't necessarily consider to be legitimate, stop fucking guys that you would call a deadbeat, right? Stop fucking guys that are careless. Well,
Absolutely.
The same thing can be true to guys. Don't just go out there and settle for Mrs. Right Now, right? Miss Right Now, right? Miss Right Now has been Miss Right Now for a shitload of other guys. She's probably carrying something. And if you're not careful with her, she's going to be carrying something else. And that's a situation that you want to avoid because, again, our yes has the full backing of federal law, of national law in most countries. Most countries have a child support system because the government likes to protect its own coffers. And most first world countries, at least, have a welfare system. And for some reason, politicians think that making men pay for women's stupid choices helps to protect their coffers from their welfare system. All it really does is justify more government agencies, and it costs more money than it brings in. But that's a whole other story there. In the meantime, one of the reasons, at least in the United States, one of the reasons that guys often don't want to use condoms is because their parents made the stupid decision to cut off the skin that would glide, back and forth, that would allow them to glide and actually have sensation, even with a condom on. And so it's unfortunate. Women blame men for not wearing condoms. Women blame men for not wanting to wear condoms. But women are usually the ones that sign the consent form at the hospital to cut off the skin that would help a guy not give a shit about the difference between the condom and not having a condom. So ladies, don't cut your babies. If you want them to be careful and you want your grandbabies to be born into an economically and socially sound situation instead of a single mother home. That's one more reason to not cut your babies. You shouldn't cut them anyway because for fuck's sake, it's their body, right? You want your body your choice, give him his body his choice.
Exactly.
But yeah, as guys, it's a rotten deal. But advice officially from me is don't ever trust a woman to tell you that she's on birth control. Don't trust her to tell you that she's not infected with anything. For one thing, she might not know. And for another thing, she's certainly not going to want to tell you if she wants you to get into her pants. So no, don't expose yourself like that. Don't take that risk. That's where a lot of testicular and penile cancers come from HPV. And even if you're vaccinated, there are strains that can get through. And it's also where a lot of throat cancer comes from. So dental dams are a thing too. That's important. But she goes on. She goes on with her bullshit here. In her new book, Ejaculate Responsibly, A Whole New Way to Think About Abortion, which is not new anymore because it's been months.
Well, no, it's the same conclusion, but from a completely different direction that you would get from the Catholic Church, like that Monty Python song. Every sperm is sacred.
Yeah.
Every sperm is great. If a sperm gets wasted, God gets quite irate. In the Catholic faith, no sperm can land anywhere but inside a woman. Whereas this is the only place you can't put sperm is in a woman. It's Gnosticism, folks. It's just like religion, but from completely the other direction.
Yep. And Blair has reframed the conversation about sex, contraception, and abortion in 28 succinct arguments that we are supposed to get excited about. The book is based on Blair's 2018 viral tweet, "Men are 100% responsible for unwanted pregnancies." Blair posits that men should share contraceptive responsibility and become active participants in conversations around birth control.
Well, then you just went back on what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Either they're 100% responsible or they should share. Share.
Yeah. So I'm going to look at the tweet if it's still up, because that's the argument. Let's see if it's... Hopefully I'm not blocked. Oh, I'm not logged in. Let's see if it lets me... Yeah, this might be... It's not going to show the whole thing.
What even happens when men try to enter the conversation? Women shit all over everything they say. Oh, you're a man. You shouldn't have an opinion. Well, get the fuck out of here then. You don't really want to hear. You don't want to share responsibility. You just want to focus the blame on men. Just be fucking honest.
What she wants is to argue that women are not responsible for pregnancy. Like, period. She wants to argue that because women are not, in her opinion, responsible for pregnancy, then they can be considered victims of it, and abortion should be legal because women are victims of their own choices that they're not responsible for. Like, that's the whole point of this article. It has actually nothing to do with men. It's all about, but feminists do blame men for anti-abortion arguments, even though most of us who are anti-abortion are women. The majority of us who are anti-abortion are women. Okay, so you have to be signed in now. If somebody makes a Twitter thread, you now have to be signed in to Twitter to see it. So, she says, "I'm a mother of 6 and a Mormon. I have a good understanding of arguments surrounding abortion, religious and otherwise. I've been listening to men grandstand about women's reproductive rights, and I'm convinced men actually have zero interest in stopping abortion. Here's why." And she goes on to say, "If you want to stop abortion, you need to prevent unwanted pregnancies. And men are 100% responsible for unwanted pregnancies." No, for real, they are. Perhaps you are thinking, it takes 2. And yes, it does take 2 for intentional pregnancies. So here's where she's going to make the argument that if you gamble, you didn't consent to lose the gamble.
Oh, wow.
Yes. But all unwanted pregnancies are caused by the irresponsible ejaculations of men. Period. Don't believe me? Let me walk you through it. Let's start with this. Women can only get pregnant about 2 days each month. That's true. And that's for a limited number of years. That's also true. Women are aware of this, but women don't necessarily pay attention to which days those are. That's one area of responsibility. It's your body. You should know what it's doing, right? She doesn't argue that. So she argues that makes 24 days a year a woman might get pregnant. But men can cause pregnancy 365 days a year. There's her first flaw. Not if they're having sex with a woman who can't get pregnant that day.
Right. And I don't know, I kind of want to delve into that a little bit deeper. I know I would think, from what I've always been taught, that you have 2 days of optimal time for ovulation, right? But I've always heard that you can, if you ovulate and you're on your period, then you can still get pregnant. I don't know how the two happen at the same time, but I don't know.
Yeah. So
but
the first
the
first thing she's got wrong is it's you're right. It's 2 days of optimal chance. In women who have fertility issues, it's 2 days of likelihood, right? But when you ovulate, your ovum lives, if I remember right, for about 5 days.
Right.
Before you you drop the egg out and it's gone. It starts out, has to go through the fallopian tube before it hits the uterus. And often fertilization happens in the fallopian tube, and then implantation takes place in the uterus. Sometimes it goes wrong and takes place in the fallopian tube, and that's a pregnancy that it's fair to terminate because it's never going to survive. The baby cannot survive that, so all you're deciding with an abortion at that point is whether the baby's death is going to take the mother along with it.
Right.
So there's that. But semen also has the possibility of living for more than a short period of time. And so you actually have a 5 or 6 day period of time during which you actually can get pregnant after ovulation. And
I think it's like 48 hours for semen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the environment that you create in your uterus, depending on what you eat, this is something like women have all these tricks and tips for determining the sex of their child based on this knowledge. So it's not like women don't know this, right? It's just that feminists, and that includes right-wing feminists like this one, like to pretend that this information isn't out there. Women will tell you if you want to have a boy, eat things that are more likely to make the environment inside your uterus less acidic, because the sperm that are going to make your child male swim faster. But if you want to have a girl, make it acidic in there. Eat hot peppers, eat lemons and oranges and grapefruits and all that kind of shit, because it'll make it more acidic. It'll kill off the sperm that are going to make a boy, and the girl's sperm apparently have thicker mucous membranes that cover them or whatever, and they survive that environment slightly longer. To me, I'm not sure if any of that actually works. Didn't try it.
Sounds
didn't
like
worry about
bullshit.
it. It sounds like bullshit. It's old wives' tales. But it still stems from knowing that it takes time for sperm to get to the egg, and that it takes time for eggs to get down the fallopian tubes into the uterus, and that there is more than just the 2 day period where, those 2 days are optimum. Least risk of an ectopic pregnancy, least risk of failure to fertilize altogether, fertilizing too late to implant, things like that. So there you go. And this, if you want a citation for that idea, the wives' tale, the wives in my family have said that for generations, including the midwives. But like I said, it's untested in my case. I really didn't do anything to try to determine the sex of the baby. So, but she goes on. 24 days a year that a woman might get pregnant. Well, that's not true. About 60 days, actually. And it doesn't absolve her of responsibility for the situation. It actually gives her information she can use to manage the situation. And there is actually a method of birth control. Most people make jokes about it, but it's a real thing called the rhythm method, where you abstain during that ideal time to get pregnant, and you only have sex outside of that ideal time to get pregnant. And I wouldn't put my faith in it, but you can always add that to your spectrum of birth control. If you are using barrier methods and other things, you could say, all right, well, this week I'm more fertile. We're going to watch movies instead of doing the deed. You know, we're going to go out dancing or use our energy some other way. There you go.
Much like happens during the period of release. I'm not sure what the polite thing to call it is. You can extend it forward a couple of days because the fertility days come just before the period days, right? Am I getting that wrong?
Yep. No, that's about right. That's about right. You can, for about a week before your period, and a few days into your period, you're at risk. You consider yourself at risk because you don't exactly know when you've ovulated. So there is that. But that's her first argument. She goes on, if you're a man who ejaculates multiple times a day, you could cause multiple pregnancies daily. Says, again, she's talking about this like men are just walking down the street, ejaculating, and women come along and, oh shit, oops, I fell in a puddle of pregnancy. What was that doing in the middle of the sidewalk? Stop ejaculating irresponsibly, men. You know, there used to be laws about no spitting on the sidewalk. Right? Come on.
Better wear your eyeglasses, ladies. Protect your eyes.
So I went hiking last week and I was doing just fine, and then boom, all of a sudden, out of the bushes jumps this horrific giant one-eyed trouser snake. Anyway,
They could be shooting jizz at them like fucking super soakers.
Oh, jeez.
Remember those water guns?
Jeez, when I was a kid, we used to have squirt gun fights. That don't put that image in my head, man. Those were like a neighborhood-wide thing. We'd have 4 blocks of kids running around, peeking around corners and shooting with our little squirt guns, like.
That's what it's like in her mind, except they're all filled with jizz.
It's not like, when a guy's at home and doing his own thing in his own room without anybody else pregnant or present that he shoots off and boom, they get out their little map. Oh, where's the girlfriend's house? Let's go get her. Woohoo! No. She was there for the conception every single time. Conception doesn't happen without both sexes pregnant. That means the woman is involved, and she was active in the creation of the baby. So, there we go. In theory, she says, a man could cause 1,000+ unwanted pregnancies in just 1 year. Oh my gosh. Stop running around and hitting women with your magic dicks, guys. It's dangerous. So she goes on.
It sure is. It sure is, guys. You better watch where you stick that thing, man. You find the wrong one, man. You will have a stalker for life. Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah, there is that issue as well. Forget STIs, forget pregnancy. There is the woman who doesn't let go, even after it's obvious the relationship is not going to work out.
Yeah.
She says. And though their sperm gets crappier as they age, by the way, that happens with your eggs too, lady.
Right.
You pass the good ones first. Men can cause unwanted pregnancies from puberty till death. Well, technically, that's not true. Simply because as a man gets older, he, like a woman who gets older, starts to deteriorate and at some point may become helpless. Most of the men that I took care of in nursing homes were in some way or another wounded, like physically, not just psychologically, but physically. They had bad backs. They had there was a double amputee. I've taken care of guys that have had strokes. I've taken care of guys that have had heart attacks that barely could walk down the hallway by themselves. I haven't taken care of in any nursing home where I worked. I haven't taken care of any man that was not more helpless than at least most of the women that were living there. So it's bullshit there too, because that's one where again, now I'm not counting I when you say unwanted pregnancy, if you ordered a baby and one was delivered to your uterus, you don't get to say no. There's no takebacks here. Okay,
Right,
you
right.
don't
You
get to
can't
say that you didn't order that.
Yeah, you can't return it to Amazon.
Like,
And if like she said, it takes two to tango only when it comes to a pregnancy, you're separating that from unwanted. That only men are 100% responsible for unwanted pregnancies. It's only the unwanted thing that you're pointing to there. But if both of you don't want it, then you're both responsible for the factor of unwantedness.
Right.
exactly.
So if you want to, so just want a baby. That's a solution. Just want it. You can make yourself want something, can't you? But apparently, it's only men who actively unwant things.
Exactly.
Yep. And that's the situation. Women pretty much don't have any agency, according to these people. Women, you can't want something if you don't have agency, right? So all babies technically are unwanted. If you ask a feminist, but
Unless she wants the baby,
yeah,
then it's a wanted pregnancy.
and then suddenly she has the agency to want it.
Right. It's only her say that matters whether or not it's a wanted or unwanted pregnancy. Because there have been plenty of men who did not want the mother to go through with the abortion, and she just went right along and did whatever she wanted to do.
Yep.
So let's not put all the onus on men in regards to unwanted pregnancies. And if unwanted pregnancies are, well, I'm not going to go down that road because I was going to talk about like financial abortions
Yeah.
for men, but that's not really the case in this situation because anyway, let's move on.
Yeah. Well, to talk about financial abortion, like my bottom line on that is this: do women have something that is an equivalent? The answer is yes, and they make the decision for both the mother and the father. They don't
Right.
just make the decision for themselves. Safe haven abandonment, if they don't give if they don't give any clues to the people that are receiving the baby at a safe haven abandonment center, they don't get arrested for that. They don't get told they can't drop the baby off. They're still allowed to do the abandonment. Those people are supposed to try to get her to say who the dad is, but she doesn't have to, right? And they're supposed to try to find the dad, but that kind of relies on having clues.
Yeah.
So
I
all
saw somebody.
he makes the decision. If paternal surrender just makes the decision for the dad, it leaves the decision open so that the mother can make her choice independently of his. She's not required to go along with his choice. She can retain custody if she wants to. She just can't drag him along with her. Whereas safe haven abandonment does make the decision for both the mother and the father. The father can't do it if on his own. If she has custody, it's kidnapping, and if she does it, she's not in any trouble, even if she doesn't say who he is. So, I call bullshit on the whole complaint about paternal surrender thing until safe haven abandonment goes away.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I saw somebody in one of your threads who was arguing that well, if a woman gives up a child at a safe abandonment, well, she gives up the rights for both of them. And so, well, that should be on, it's his responsibility too. He has no choice in the situation, you idiot. It's completely her choice. How can you argue that he had any say in it when she can do it freely of her own will?
Yeah. And then you also have, abortion, which again, the father gets no say in it. There's a lot of people that are like, well, you shouldn't oppose abortion because it's an advantage for men. Well, how? How? You have zero control over it, right? And I will say this. Feminists argue that victims of rape who are female, who get pregnant, are a reason why abortion needs to be accessible to women who are not victims of rape. That we shouldn't even be allowed to ask. All women should have access to abortion so that the utterly important factor of rape victims being able to abort if they get pregnant is preserved without them having to go through any uncomfortable questioning and all that stuff. All right? That's fine. You want to claim that. I disagree with that argument, but let's take that and apply that logic to female perpetrated rape. All right? If you are a person who argues that abortion should be unrestricted so that the less than 2% of abortions done annually on babies of rape victims can be done without any embarrassment, then you should accept that if a woman rapes a male victim and becomes pregnant, he should have the right to force her to abort if he does not want the child to be born.
And I don't think anyone's in favor of that, except some really fucked up people on probably both sides of the aisle, extreme sides of the aisle.
But it is the logical end of that, right? That all right, he doesn't have any say in the matter if she wants to abort, and she has the right to abort because the child has been inflicted on her against her will. Well, in a pregnancy that occurs from raping a male victim, he's had the child inflicted on him. And the state says he owes child support to whoever has custody of that child if he is not the one who gets custody of that child. So if the child goes into foster care, he has to pay foster care child support. If the rapist retains custody, he has to pay child support to his rapist. It is as unfair as making a woman carry to term before choosing whether or not to give the baby up for adoption. To make a man pay child support for a child he didn't want to conceive and didn't choose to risk conceiving. Right? So obviously the solution is, if abortion is nothing, if it's no big deal, you can't argue bodily autonomy for a rapist, right? A rapist that forced the child, the conception of the child on the father. Like, you can't argue that it's a bodily autonomy issue to make her undo that. Especially if you're, arguing that it's not a child until she determines its child status by giving birth. You just forbid her from giving birth. You are not allowed to give birth to a child by somebody that you raped without his consent.
This is where it's helpful that we have two different definitions of the word labor. Mm-hmm. You can't force a woman to go through labor for, it can be up to a couple of days. How much labor does a man have to go through for 18 years of child support? It's quite a lot. It's a bit more than a couple of days. Yep.
So yeah, so think on that one, abortion advocates, and women who blame men for pregnancy. That's a big question right there. Whose fault is it when she rapes him? Unquestionably, when she uses a gun or she uses drugs to make him unaware of what's going on, which can happen without interfering with his ability to perform, right? Or she uses him being under the age of majority, where he's incapable of appraising his actions sufficiently and cannot legally consent, right? And how does that work? How does that make him responsible? So she goes on with this. What about birth control? If a woman doesn't want to risk an unwanted pregnancy, why wouldn't she just use birth control? If a woman can manage to figure out how to get an abortion, surely she can get birth control, right? Great questions. Modern birth control is probably the greatest invention of the last century, and I am very grateful for it. Well, yeah, you should thank men for that, Gabrielle. The side effects for many women are ridiculously harmful. So now she's going to talk about birth control as if only hormonal birth control exists. Birth control pills, specifically. So ridiculous that when an oral contraception for men was created, it wasn't approved. Actually, the side effects of the oral contraceptive for men that was under investigation that wasn't approved were not as minor as the side effects that women experience from hormonal birth control. Stroke is rare. It happens, but there was quite a significant level of dysfunction in that study. It was causing infertility, permanent infertility and everything. It was really bad. And it wasn't, the side effects were not rare like that. So, and yeah, she goes into the list being a third as long as the known side effects for women's oral contraception. So I'm going to address that too. Alright? So if you have a list of things that somebody did to you, and I say, my boss is worse than your boss. Right? My boss doesn't include me in the happy birthday wishes that she sends around every year to all the employees on their birthdays. She forgets mine every year, right? I'm not talking about my real boss. That doesn't happen in real life. But let's say that's one of my complaints, right? Say I have a complaint that my boss doesn't approve my time off requests, but approves other people's time off requests. Those are shitty things, right? My boss talks down to me. Pretty shitty, My boss gives me the crap jobs, the crap tasks, and saves the easy ones for her favorite employee. Got a bunch of, maybe I could have 50 different complaints that are on that level. If I'm working retail, my boss makes me deal with the angry customers and gives the nice customers to the other cashier. If we have to decide on the temperature the store is going to be in, I don't get a say in it because my boss doesn't think I should. Or anything like that. Little things like that. And maybe one complaint of, I have been scheduled to work outside my stated hours of availability. Something more serious. My boss is threatening to fire me because I won't take time from my other job to work at this job. Something like that. So you got one very serious complaint. And then, my boss is worse than your boss because I got 500 little complaints like that, right? And you say, well, my boss locked the office door and raped me. Well, you only have one complaint. My boss is obviously worse. I have 500 complaints and you only have one complaint. Nobody's going to buy that. That's bullshit. But that's what this woman is doing with birth control. Right? I've been on the pill. It has side effects. They suck. None of them are that bad for the overwhelming majority of women. My mom had worse side effects when she was on it than I did. And she warned me against using it because of those side effects, but I didn't have those problems. And I used the pill for a while, and I used the shot for a while, and I was fine, right? But the side effects of the male birth control, some of those side effects included serious health conditions, and where they say, well, less than 2% of women who take hormonal birth control have a risk of blood clotting and strokes. It was a much higher percentage for men. It was not a safe gamble. And there weren't ways to be like, well, you have this historical health condition in your family, you probably shouldn't use these. It was kind of random with men. So it's bullshit for her to make that argument. But let's say birth control pills. All hormonal birth control is bad. All right. Imagine we take hormonal birth control off the table. Women still have female condoms, still have diaphragms, still have contraceptive gel, contraceptive foam, contraceptive film, which is kind of a barrier that you attach it to your cervix. And then they also have IUDs that are not hormonal, right? So you have all of those things. You still can refuse to consent without the use of a condom. And you can still do oral or anal instead of vaginal. Like, you don't necessarily have to have vaginal penetration for sex. Like, women know that. Right? There's a whole series of things you can do there. You can still use at least 3 different types of birth control, including him using a condom, and never change your hormonal balance. So there's that. She says, there's a lot to be unpacked in just in that story, but I'll simply point out, in case you didn't know, that as a society, we really don't mind if women suffer mentally or physically, as long as it makes things easier for men. I'm going to repeat her saying this, because this is such, like, you could fertilize your neighbor's farm with this one. She says, as a society, we really don't mind if women suffer mentally or physically, as long as it makes things easier for men. Lady, who takes out your trash?
Silence is deafening, isn't it?
Who collects your trash, lady? Who comes in a truck and picks up things that you throw out, even if they stink, even if they're heavy, throws them in the back of the truck, takes the risk of working around a crusher, drives that humongous vehicle, takes all of the contamination risks dealing with your trash and everybody else's. Who does that? How many of those people are women?
Exactly. You know, and they love to complain about unpaid labor, the unpaid labor that women do. Well, what about the unseen labor that men do?
Mm-hmm.
The unrespected work that men do. Please give me a break.
Yeah.
I don't get paid to sit on my ass and fold laundry and watch TV while, if I have a kid, I maybe, make some food for it and play with it a little bit and come on. God, just stop it. This is the life that you chose and you complain about it? Give me a break.
Parenting is tough for both sexes. I will say
it is.
There's a lot of work involved in that. But it's work that you chose to do. And it's work that you knew was unpaid before you chose to do it. Same thing with living, cohabitating. Like, you picked up that work. That wasn't work that somebody dumped on you. You picked up that work, and now you're complaining about it. But I mean, like, just that invisible, the guy that takes your trash every week. The invisible work of the guy that gets your power back on after a thunderstorm, right?
Right.
The invisible work of the guy that gets your power back on after a squirrel decides to barbecue itself on the power lines, or in the power. We've had some horrific accidents of late. Like they pop, actually. Like,
oh no.
Yeah, it's really not pretty. But and then a bunch of men have to come in, and they have a whole series of steps they have to take before they can even start the job, because you want to make sure that you are not going to come into contact with live electrical feed, because it'll stay live and you won't. But yeah, and it's like it cooks you. So yeah, those women don't think about that. Most women don't know that the utility that gives you power, that brings power to your house, has a job in areas where there are power lines that are not otherwise accessible, where one man flies a helicopter with a metal platform sticking out from the side of it, and another man sits on that platform and works on a power line repair. Like, he has to do maintenance and repair of a power line that way because it's too high up where there's no other way to get to it. Right? Those are things that women don't think about. Women don't think about when they put gas in their car. They don't think about the roughnecks working on oil rigs or in oil fields and the risks they take. The machinery that they work with can crush them. It's one of the most horrific accidents Mr. Ballin talks about on his YouTube channel is something that happened on an oil rig to a guy. Like, I can't even talk about it on this channel. It's not our style, and I think that would. But those risks, those types of risks, they'll sit down to a fish dinner and not think about the men who risk their lives deep sea fishing in the ocean to get that fish. They'll order crab meat at a fancy restaurant and not realize that chances are when a ship goes out crabbing, it's going to come back with one dead guy. Like, that's
one main
such, yeah,
missing an arm.
That's not even just chances. It's there will be injuries. There's a pretty high chance of death. It's a very high risk. But if those things weren't available for them, they would complain, right? Absolutely would complain. They don't think about the fact that we hear all the time about frontline workers in COVID, the nurses that were frontline workers. But, before there was COVID, there were other infectious diseases. Many, many of them are more dangerous, less curable, less survivable, more contagious, and the profession of infectious disease specialist is dominated by men. Men are at war with bacteria. Men are at war with flesh-eating bacteria, with antibiotic-resistant gut bacteria, and so on, viruses that you don't want to know about. But yeah, it's, we don't mind women suffering as long as it makes things easier for men. Like, the bullshit. I need my hip waders. Jeez.
Mm-hmm.
But good news, she says. Men, even with the horrible side effects, women are still very willing to use birth control. Unfortunately, it's harder to get it than it should be. Which, that's not true either.
No, it's not at all. Jesus Christ. Do you have a job? I'm pretty sure if you do, most people who work have medical insurance. I know that there are certain jobs that do not provide medical insurance, but you still have access to over-the-counter birth control methods. So spare me.
Well, and if you don't go to your doctor, right, there's the many minute clinics or whatever at CVS, and I think Walgreens has them. Some Krogers have them. Walmart has them. Of course, Walmart's an imitation of CVS, so that's to be expected. But like all of these different pharmacies and department stores that have pharmacies have little clinics, and then you also have Planned Parenthood, which, if you cannot tell me that Planned Parenthood helps you get free birth control pills and helps you with a free appointment for birth control pills, if you can't admit that to me, then I win the argument that Planned Parenthood only exists for abortion.
Right.
Right, because it's obviously not helping you get birth control.
Oh, no, but they do breast cancer screening, Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And they claim to do things for men too, but then when you look for where are the clinics that do that, almost none of their clinics do that. But yeah, so it's not really that hard to get. Birth control options for women don't necessarily require you to go to your family doctor. You can go to a clinic. The reason that hormonal birth control requires a physician and a prescription is because it is a drug. And it can interact with other drugs. You need to have the information that if you take it with the wrong drugs, they can make it ineffective, or they can make it over effective, and it can cause you problems. And it, there are certain foods you shouldn't eat while you're taking it if you want it to be effective, and then you have to take it at the same time every day if you want it to be effective. But that's par for the course. Like my allergy medicine, if I take prescription allergy medicine instead of just the over-the-counter stuff, I have to go to a doctor and get that medicine. Right? The asthma medicine that kept me from dying when I was a kid, I couldn't get that without going to a doctor. So I don't think complaints that the same is true with hormones, hormonal medicine that you're taking for birth control, are legitimate. Those are not legitimate complaints. Especially when, if you don't want to use that, there's a whole bunch of other things you can do instead. And yeah, it doesn't have to be free. So, in fact, there are many people trying to make it more expensive by fighting to make sure insurance companies refuse to cover it. That's not true. Although they do fight for insurance companies' right to not cover it. But that doesn't ensure that they won't. And granted, people think that an insurance company refusing to cover the drug would save them money. But if you get pregnant and you give birth at the hospital, your insurance company covers that. And then they cover the child's medical care. So I think they would find birth control to be cheaper. She says oral contraceptives for women can't be acquired easily or at the last minute. So the only part of that that's true is the last bit. They can't be acquired at the last minute. You can't go out 5 minutes before you're going to have sex and get birth control pills.
Yeah.
But you can get...
But as she's about to also say, and they don't work instantly.
Yeah, and they don't work instantly.
That's exactly how the morning after pill works. I don't know if that's technically contraception,
right.
But it kind of is, isn't it?
It keeps implantation from happening.
Yeah, and as long as you do it but as long as you do it in the first couple of days or whatever it is, it's not instantaneous. Well, yes, it is instantaneous. It's as instantaneous as any pill can be. Yeah, surely.
But spermicidal gel, foam, the sponge, the film, those are all. You can go out to any pharmacy where you get condoms, and you can get all of those things. Diaphragms have to be fitted, but if you're going to be sexually active, you should take care of your sexual health and do that ahead of time. IUDs also have to be done, with a doctor's care, because that's an actual invasive procedure. But all of the spermicidal things, the female condom, those are all things that you can just go get. Right? So you can add your birth control beyond his condom, even if you don't take hormonal birth control. She goes on. And they don't work instantly yet, but some things do. If we're talking about the pill, it requires consistent daily use and doesn't leave much room for mistakes, forgetfulness, or unexpected disruptions to daily schedule. Again, the side effects can be brutal. I'm still grateful for it. Please don't take it away. I don't care if you're grateful for it. You're responsible, if you decide that's the route you're going to go, for maintaining it. If you get a car, and you drive your car, and you get into an accident, and you kill somebody in the accident, you don't get to tell the court, well, I forgot to get my brakes done so long that they just stopped working, and then I forgot that I didn't have brakes, and I went out and drove my car. That doesn't absolve you of responsibility. That actually can add an enhancement to your crime if you knowingly drove a defective vehicle. Right? I was texting. That actually gets you more in trouble. I was drunk. That actually gets you more in trouble. Right? Only when you're talking about, well, I shouldn't have to deal with this pregnancy because I forgot to take my birth control pill. I was distracted. I ate the wrong thing. I failed to maintain the integrity of my system. Right? That's your fault. You did that.
it's not only inexcusable, it's just lazy. It's just plain fucking lazy.
Yeah.
You know?
It's sad. I mean, so you think about this. I want to go back to what I said earlier. Or said in the, I guess I didn't say it in the opener, but I did say it in our low bar. Right? The argument for ending the financial restrictions on women under coverture, which were in place because men were obligated to manage women's money and financially support their welfare, and it was very there was a set of ethics around that. Like, if she came into the marriage with property, he got control over it, but he was only allowed to use it in her interests. He wasn't allowed to, like, just take it for himself and use it. And so that was ended. The argument for ending that was that women have agency, that they are adults, that they are fully capable of managing their own affairs, and they should be able to manage their own money and get bank accounts and get credit cards and run up debt, and they should be expected to pay it themselves, and we aren't placing any additional demands on men, which is bullshit. Women run up debt all the time, and then men are expected to pay it. But still, that was the argument. Women have that agency to manage their own financial system and to have financial autonomy. And abortion is the argument that women have the right to reproductive autonomy, which comes with the same kind of responsibility to manage your system. And yet, here we are being told how hard it is and how a woman can't manage her own system. Should we go back to coverture? Should we have guardians? That women can't go out on a date without I can't think of the term. When you chaperone.
Yes.
Like, women can't go out on a date without chaperones because they can't decide whether or not to have sex. They can't make sure that their birth control is managed, and so on, right? So she says,
No ding ding without the wedding ring.
There you go. She says, I'm just saying that women's birth control isn't simple or easy. In contrast, let's look at birth control for men, meaning condoms. Because, guys, you only have one option. Yeah. Condoms are readily available at all hours. Inexpensive, convenient, and don't require a prescription. They're effective and work on demand. Instantly.
How effective? How effective are they? The jury's out, but it's 90-something%. Let's go with 95%. That means every 20 times you have sex, you'll get pregnant once. Not particularly effective, and that's only if you use them. There are certain skills involved in applying a condom to make sure it doesn't tear, to make sure there's no fucking air bubble at the bottom of it or something. And even if you do it absolutely right, there's still a higher than negligible chance that it didn't work. There's countless stories of people who used a condom and then got pregnant. Whoops, how did that happen? Because they're not that effective. And then, no, they're not inexpensive if you're poor. If you want to have sex on anything resembling a regular basis, you need to. I have no idea how expensive they are. I don't. That's.
Well, there's that, and then you have condoms can have side effects. I'm just gonna tell you guys, discovering an allergy sucks at any point in time. But holy fuck, in the middle of in flagrante delicto, it is awful when you discover that you're allergic to latex and there is latex up against a mucous membrane. And even worse than discovering that you're allergic to latex is discovering that you're both fucking allergic to latex. I will tell you, it kills the mood. Then you find out that, at least in the 90s, things have gotten a little bit better. But at least, in the 90s, alternative condoms that are not latex, non-latex condoms were crappy in the 90s. They sucked. Like, that was a good reason right there for abstinence. And now we've got silicone. And frankly, that should be the primary thing now. Latex should not be the primary thing, but it is. Right? And it is still a little bit more expensive to get your condoms if you are allergic to latex. And latex allergy is becoming more common. So, she can go fuck herself with that idea that they're just anywhere and everywhere and they're easy to get. I keep getting told they're free. Well, no. If you go to the places that give away free condoms, they only have latex. They do not have non-latex, at least in my experience. So yeah, they can. That's baloney. You shell out.
And yeah, to bring it up again, a condom is not a male form of birth control. It goes over a penis. It goes over a penis, but like I said, there's nothing stopping a woman any more than a man from applying a condom and demanding that a condom be applied. So this is why we frame things as unilateral. A condom is not a male form of birth control. Neither is a femidom. I know nobody wears femidoms because they're fucking an absurd adventure. But a man can demand that a woman wears a femidom. So it's not a female form of birth control. It's a mutually applied form of birth control.
Yep. And somebody says, what about lambskin? Well, lambskin is porous. It is less effective than latex. And what we had historically as an alternative was not flexible the way that the latex is. Now, silicone has fixed that. Silicone is flexible. Like the old school non-latex condoms are hard as hell to get on to penis of unusual size. I guess, well, even the usual size, I don't think they would be easy to get on that. But if it's even slightly larger than normal, like if it's just, it's ridiculous. It's hard. You got to be able to stretch the thing to get it on. You can't just roll it down because you're dealing with something that even erect is still human flesh, not something inanimate and solid. So it's still flexible. So it's an adventure in and of itself trying to use condoms that are non-latex. And even the other thing is that they did not do a very good job of making the big ones. So there were a lot of problems with those. Like, it was bad. I think vegans can't use the lambskin ones either. So there's also that. Some people have a moral objection. Like, somebody mentioned being vegan. Like, as far as I'm concerned, if you're vegan, that's your own problem. But
Jesus Christ! Look, I gotta say, if you're that devoted to the cause, I guess I gotta give you some kind of support.
At least latex is vegan. It comes from plants. It comes from trees. That's why I'm allergic to it. But I really wish I'd discovered that at the dentist's office instead, because I'm telling you guys, never want to have that experience again. Mm-hmm. Like, Jesus. That was a bad evening. So her bullshit basically makes it sound like only women have a rough time with birth control. Only the birth control that is the hardest to use or has the most side effects is women's birth control, and all other birth control is irrelevant, right? Then she goes on, men can keep them stocked up just in case. So they're always prepared. So she doesn't realize that condoms have expiration dates on them because the materials that they're made out of deteriorate, and eventually you get to a point where if you try to use it, it will break. Amazing, she says.
Or how about the fact? How about maybe you provide the condom?
Yeah, women can keep condoms stocked up.
Yes.
Like, what was that one scene in Pretty Woman where she just pulled aside I think it was in her boot, and there's a whole bunch of condoms there, different condoms there for him to choose from. Like, yeah, you can keep condoms in your purse, that you have like 500 other things in there. Just make sure you keep them in a case that's hard to puncture if you got ink pins and stuff, because you know you want them to work, right? But you can carry condoms, lady. You don't have to. Men don't have to do that for you, and you can say, "No glove, no love."
Yep. Trust me, ladies. They're just as expensive for you as they are for men.
There you go.
Whereas there are many forms of female birth control that the state will supply you free of charge.
There is that as well.
Yeah.
So she's full of shit with that. As a bonus in general, women love when men use condoms. They keep us from getting STDs. They don't lessen our pleasure during sex. Yeah, we don't mind if you lessen your pleasure. They don't lessen our pleasure.
Wait, this is something I didn't know until I was like 20, and I talked to a woman, and she was like, and I was like, really? They reduce her pleasure as well? She's like, yep, they absolutely do. So what the fuck's this bitch talking about?
Yeah. Well, and the reason ribbed condoms exist is because the other kind can smooth out a guy's skin and everything. Like, you don't have the veininess, you don't have the texture. Skin is not smooth. Skin is, like, that's why you're able to get a grip on things. Because you have, your skin actually has little cracks and fissures in it and everything. It's not smooth. And your mucous membrane, even more so, there's friction that takes place. Well, condom's a total different story. It's not the same. And so of course it's gonna, if the woman has vaginal orgasms, not all women do, I guess. I was on Honey Badger Radio before I learned that that's not universal. But so I don't know. I guess it's actually unusual for women to have vaginal orgasms. But in any case, like, that the ribbed condoms are supposed to help. So there's that. So she's full of shit there. And then she goes on, they don't prevent us from climaxing. And the best part, cleanup is so much easier. No waddling to the toilet as your jizz drips down our legs. So why in the world are there ever unwanted pregnancies? Why don't men just use condoms every time they have sex? Seems so simple, right? And then she goes into blaming men. Oh, I remember men, quote, men don't love condoms.
I have to ask, if a man uses a condom and you still get pregnant, is it still his fault?
Yeah, that's a very
I'm going to hazard a guess that you're going to say yes, Gabrielle.
Yep. And men frequently pressure women to have sex without a condom. I actually have never... I don't remember ever encountering that. Had one break. The condom, not the man. But, I mean, that can...
You never broke a man during sex? Oh, try harder, Hannah.
No, I like my sex partners.
We like to be broken.
I don't have sex with people I don't like. I suppose I could cuddle somebody to death, but yeah. And it's not unheard of for men to remove the condom during sex. Like, ladies, let's go here.
Wait, during sex? During it? How?
If you don't know what his hands are doing during sex, you're doing it wrong. I'm going to repeat that. If you don't know what his hands are doing during sex, you're doing it wrong.
And she's saying this as if women don't also do it too.
Yeah,
I want to feel you. Take that sticky thing off.
Yeah, she's talking about stealthing. She linked to an article about stealthing. Like,
and then there's jizz jacking, which we don't know how mythological this is. The idea of pulling a used condom out of the bin in the toilet.
Not mythological at all.
There's
Yeah.
been a court case. There's been a court case. That was-
There's which suggests there's been many such cases. Many.
Yeah. Yes. But there is one court case that made the news. But as far as stealthing is concerned, I'm gonna put it to men this way. All right. I know that pickup artists talk about reproduction as like it's a point system, and just conceiving a child, it makes you winner of the game or whatever, right? But not if you hand your child over to a deadbeat. And women who knowingly, willfully, and deliberately bring a child into a poverty situation that they keep the child in by retaining custody after the birth are deadbeats. Right? Don't give your child to a deadbeat. That's not a win. It's not a win for you, and it's not a win for your child. Your child's going to have worse outcomes in that situation. You won nothing by stealthing. You did something stupid. You put yourself in a bad situation. You took a risk of getting saddled with a child support obligation for life. And on top of all of that, you took a risk that your child is going to be with a woman from the set of women that are the most likely to neglect or abuse your child. Don't do that. Like, if you give a rat's ass about reproducing, at least love your children enough to give them a better situation than that. Right? So that's my take on stealthing, right? And yeah, sperm jacking is definitely a thing. Women who deny it are liars. They know about it. They encourage it, and they even encourage lying about birth control in order to facilitate it. So there you go.
And it throws a big old wrench into this idea that men are 100% responsible for unwanted pregnancies, because that right there is a woman being literally 100% responsible for a pregnancy unwanted by a man.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't happen. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's okay.
Exactly. She goes on. Let's see her next fallacy. Why would men want to have sex without a condom? Good question. Apparently it's because for the minutes they are penetrating their partner, having no condom gives the experience more pleasure. So there are men willing to risk getting women pregnant, which means literally risking her life, her health, her social status, her relationships, and her career, so that they can experience a few minutes of slightly more pleasure. Is that for real? Yes. Yes, it is.
He's not risking anything at all.
Yeah, and he's not risking anything at all. Well, and honestly, having a 9-month pregnancy before putting the child up for adoption does not risk your social status, your relationships, or your career. So that's bullshit. Unless, you got pregnant cheating on your husband. Then it might risk that relationship. And as far as pregnancy risking a woman's life, we're talking something like 73 out of 100,000 women in the United States are counted as pregnancy-related deaths, and that includes women who committed suicide due to postpartum depression. That includes women who had heart attacks or strokes the first year after they gave birth. Women whose the majority of pregnancy deaths, the leading cause of death for pregnant women is health conditions that are related to being overweight or out of shape or having a poor diet. Like, feminists will tell you it's murder. It's not. The leading cause of non-medical death is because people are so careful that pregnant women do not have accidents, and we've had such great advancements in healthcare that we've reduced medical deaths as well. But the actual leading causes of death for pregnant women are cardiac and circulatory, cardiopulmonary disorders that are generally caused by lifestyle choices. So And a lot of those can be managed through proper health care. So that's bullshit. This, why are you risking my life? You're risking your life more during sex than during the pregnancy. She goes on, what are we talking about here, pleasure-wise? If there's a pleasure scale with pain beginning at 0 and going down into the negatives, and a back scratch falling at 5, and an orgasm without a condom being a 10, where would sex with a condom fall? Like 7 or 8? Here's where she really gets into the weeds. It's not your call what a man wants. You have the right to say, well, I'm not going to participate in that, or I am going to participate in that. That's where your rights end. You don't get to decide what he wants. That's not your call. Like, is that really that hard for people to understand? His interests are not her call? So, let's see. She goes on. So, it's not... This is like the book. I swear, how much is left of this? She's got a shitload of... Like, she just went on and on. Jesus Christ.
Twitter is not the place to be writing a book. Why?
Well, and this was in 2018 where, like, it wasn't really that... Oh, jeez. She just... This is like a 30 tweet... rant. And she's whining. Whereas in my experience, men really like their testicles. If irresponsible ejaculations were putting their balls at risk, they would stop being irresponsible. Does castration seem like a cruel and unusual punishment? Definitely. But is it worse than forcing 500,000 women a year to puke daily for months, gain 40 pounds, and then rip their bodies apart at childbirth? Oh my God, the melodrama. Like, that's her kind of argument. So let's look at the interview. I'm done with her. I'm not gonna read the rest of the thread because holy fuck. But if you want to, the link for the article is on our Patreon, on the page for this this episode on our Patreon. I will try to make a page for this when the blog gets back up, but if I forget, or if it's been more than a week, I'm not going to do it because it'll come up like a new post and then it won't be a new show. Just remember to go to the Patreon and look for this. But jeez, Pete. And so now we have this woman that's made these proclamations, right, about ethics and medicine and personal care. And so far the only thing we know about her is that she is Mormon. So her interviewer, Steph Black, says, "Tell me about yourself and what brought you here." And the first thing she says, "My background is in graphic design." So the graphic design lady is an expert on ethics in interpersonal relationships. Good to know. "I started a blog in 2006 called Design Mom about the intersection of parenting and design." Oh God, that's awful. That's crap. And believe it or not, it's still going. "I can even write about abortion. That surprises some people if they've only known me for my house tours or recipes. But I was always writing about current events and political things that I was talking to my own children about."
You see, she's an expert on women because she's a woman.
God.
I mean, kind of, but kind of not, Yeah. I don't consider myself an expert on men, even though I'm arguably a professional men's rights advocate. Because an expert on men would be, well, a biologist, and I'm not a biologist.
There we go. Well, I mean, this is why I disclaim when people call me an expert, because I'm not an expert. I'm a talking head. I'm a political commentator. And I will accept the title researcher when people give it to me because I have done research. I'm not a scientist. If they call me a scientist, then no, wait a minute. I don't have, like, I don't do experimentation using the scientific method. I research by finding information that other people have discovered and evaluating their methods of discovery. Right? That's it. So I don't consider myself an expert, but I do consider myself capable of and qualified to comment on political issues based on the research and the information that I can provide people. This lady is just basically saying, I feel this way, and therefore it's true. It's the I feel unsafe narrative, but with sex. I feel unaccommodated. Like, jeez. Your book, Black says, your book really started with a viral tweet thread back in 2018 when you wrote that men were responsible for 100% of unplanned pregnancies. What has the journey been like from that tweet to this book? Blair says, it was my very first thread. Oh, jeez. That's not... my first thread went viral because I said things...
We totally couldn't tell.
I have images of Snoopy typing on his typewriter. It was a cold, blustery day.
It was a dark and stormy period.
Yes.
It was my very first thread. I had never really used Twitter for anything other than promoting blog posts. That changed during the election. I had written this piece about abortion, but I wasn't sure where to put it on my blog. It was a little angrier maybe than other things they had written. I sat on it until the Kavanaugh hearings, which was a politician after politician grandstanding about abortion. None of them cared or knew anything about abortion. It was just so maddening. So I decided to publish the thread, and it went viral instantly.
What did the Kavanaugh hearings have to do with abortion? I thought that was all about...
Well, there were two Kavanaugh
assault.
hearings. There was the sexual harassment hearing after the left tried to use sexual misconduct allegations, because they're usually effective against Republicans. They're not effective against Democrats, but they're usually effective against Republicans. And this time it didn't work. But there's also a Senate hearing to approve the president's choice. The president doesn't just get to say, this guy's going to be on the Supreme Court. Boom, he's on the Supreme Court. You actually have to have hearings and a vote on that, whether they will allow him to appoint that person or not. Right? So that's the hearings that she's talking about. And what she's referring to was politicians stating their opinions on the ethics of abortion, which she is labeled grandstanding, and none of them knowing or caring. So as soon as they have opinions on ethics, they're not valid, right? She has opinions on ethics, and as a graphic designer, her opinions on ethics are much more relevant and meaningful than, say, the opinions that civil servants have on the ethics of a medical procedure. It's like, because
who may or may not actually have any kind of understanding about the procedure, and this is just conjecture. I just, how do you know that they don't know anything about abortion? If I would hope that anyone who actually has a stance one way or the other knows enough about it to know what they're talking about and to have a stance.
There's no such thing as an adult living in the United States today. Aside from people whose disabilities preclude paying attention to such issues, there's not a normal adult living in the United States today that knows nothing about abortion. Like, she's full of crap.
Right.
We've all had it shoved down our throats. like for as long as we've been adults, and some of us I learned about abortion when I was 13. I think every girl should learn about abortion when she's 13, because then she's young enough to not accept all the made up bullshit that women use to justify it. Like she's already taking classes that show that actually no, it's not just tissue. There's obvious reasons for why there might be ethical issues with engaging in this practice, and it's debatable, right? At the very least. But yeah, I was in the 7th grade and learned what abortion was. I heard the term, and I asked my grandmother because she was a nurse. And then I wished I hadn't, because I would like to have gone my whole life not knowing that people do that. But obviously I was an opponent ever after. Grandma was very clinical in her description. She didn't pull punches. My grandmother was like the female version of Gandalf in that all right, you're going to do this, here's the way it's going to be, you're going to know. But she also was very charitable to the people involved in terms of not calling them evil, misguided, mistaken, poor choices, things like that. She wasn't judgmental, but she was very clinical about the medical end of it, and it was really gross. And I was anti-abortion for life. So yeah, she goes on, overwhelmingly the response was positive about the thread. I had been sitting on the thread for 6 months or so in my mind, these ideas were old, but they were new ideas for a lot of people. Like, all she did was articulate what feminists had been saying for years, but she articulated it in a way that women could latch onto and promote the idea that they didn't have to be responsible for their birth control. I was hearing from really progressive women that they never thought about these things, and now they're suddenly having conversation with their partners about vasectomy or the realities of birth control side effects. There were women crying to me, saying they didn't know someone could share this burden with them. It was also really amazing to hear from men for whom it clicked. I'm not even going on that link. I know that it's going to be feminist men. My blood pressure's high enough already. You can see in the comments of the thread that they're mentally going through their past sexual experiences thinking, oh crap, was I ejaculating responsibly?
Oh my god.
Was I choosing my own few seconds of pleasure over her body? Can you see that they'll go into their next sexual experience more responsibly, more aware of what's at risk? And again, this is not about you. Right? I know that women will get mad at me for that because obviously pregnancy it occurs in their body and all that, right? But she didn't make it about mutual accountability. She didn't make it about, men and women should work together to prevent conception, love your children before you conceive them, take extra precautions to make sure that you hold off on conception until you're ready to raise the child together in a loving, supportive, economically sound environment. Like, that's good advice. That would have been great advice, right? But no, she made it about condemning men for experiencing pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Shaming them for their sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Like, that's not... You're going to lecture men about, their pleasure and equate their pleasure with harm to women. You lose me immediately.
Yep.
But she goes on to say, and this is women in a nutshell. And the thread has been retweeted every day for 4 years, sometimes thousands of times a day, because abortion is in the news. So that's become women's only take. Well, It's not us. Men are responsible for this. Abortion would never happen if it wasn't for men. That's their take.
I wonder at what point they're gonna say male doctors have no right to perform abortions on women. it's not beyond the scope of
Yeah.
feminist ideology. Like, just like women don't want male security guards patting them down in the airport. At some point, they're going to say, no, male doctors don't have a right to give me an abortion. Unless the only doctor available is a man. And, okay, fair enough. I really want to kill this man's baby. And I quite fancy doctors. Hello, doctor. Do you want to fuck me and impregnate me?
Yeah, it's really disgusting, and you already have like right-wing anti-abortion women do blame men for abortion, just like this woman does. They do it a different way. They claim that it's male doctors scamming poor, innocent, scared young girls. Now, there is a degree to which I will say abortion is a scam. It's not male doctors scamming poor, innocent young women, though, and girls. It's the abortion industry, which is mostly women, including the doctors. More abortionists are women. And then there's the nurses that are involved. Those are mostly women. All the other workers at the clinic, for the most part, are women. You got male security guards when they want somebody to beat people up for trying to stop someone from having an abortion. They call them in, right? But the people that are making shitloads of money on abortion are individual women working at these clinics. And they lie to the public. And they spread lies through the public that weak women can latch on to excuse stupid choices. And women do that, right? So there is some advantage being taken. But it's like when somebody who is constantly seeking out get-rich-quick schemes gets conned by fake get-rich-quick schemes. Like if you were not being super lazy and trying to avoid work by doing this instead, you wouldn't have had that problem, right? Or somebody buying illegal drugs from strangers gets something that they weren't expecting in their drugs. Okay, well, maybe you should not have given your money to a criminal and trusted that what they were giving you was good, right? That's a dumb idea. And this is the same thing, right? But you can't blame that on men. Women are still allowing themselves, they're willfully gullible in regard to this. And that's if they're gullible. A lot of women are just willfully negligent. They don't give a shit. They the one chick that I worked with, that the one people will remember as the girl that I talked about putting the sink drain plug in with the rubber stopper up and not understanding why that didn't work. You know, when she really did, she just didn't want to do the dishes. And how I fixed that, along with the mop issue and all that. She talked about her history of 4 abortions at 18 years old, like it was nothing. It didn't matter to her. She just
wait. She'd already had 4 by the age of 18.
Yes.
Shit.
Yes. And see, that's the thing. There's like over 500,000 abortions in the U.S. every year.
Her uterus must look like Swiss cheese. Just Jesus Christ, that's disgusting.
It's spotless in there. It gets vacuumed regularly.
Ugh.
No, seriously
I need a
though.
shower.
Yeah. And this is what you run into, right? It's not that she's gullible. It's that she plays gullible when it's convenient for her to be able to be careless, and then, you know, when she doesn't want to face the consequences, when she rolled on her fertility check and or her birth control check, and she rolled a 1, and then she decided she didn't consent to that number. Like, nope, sorry lady, you don't get to control whether you get a 1 or a 20 or anything in between. So yeah.
The game is called craps.
Yeah, in that case, yeah. And that's the argument, is basically that women don't have the agency to control their fertility. That women don't have the agency to say, I'm not going to have sex with that guy because he's not I don't want even the slightest risk that he might become the father of my child, right? Not gonna do that, guy. I'm gonna wait for somebody better to come along. They don't have the agency to do that, right? That's the argument. They don't have the agency to say, no, I'm not doing this without a condom. If you want to do this, no glove, no love. Wrap it up, right? They don't have the agency, according to this woman. They don't have the agency to decide ahead of time, I am or am not going to be sexually active. It happens in the moment. You're like, you don't have a code of ethics on this. You don't have any plan for your life. You don't have any...
I mean, Hannah, when you're screwing a guy in the parking lot, there's rarely enough time to make decisions like that. Come on.
And it's a sad thing, but like, I guess it's common to at the last minute on a date be like, I was gonna be careful about sex and everything, but right now we just really have the hots for each other, and I'm gonna throw all of that to the wind, all my plans for the future down the drain for this one moment of pleasure. The same argument that she makes about men, but when women do it, it doesn't matter. When women take that same action and don't care about their future child enough to say, let's make sure first that we're not going to conceive a child in the heat of this moment, and maybe plan ahead a little bit. No, it's not a big deal. It's okay for women to do that to their children for a moment of pleasure.
Yeah, maybe have a conversation with him about kids beforehand. I can't tell you how many times I hear stories of women having kids with a guy, and then oops, they find out that he's got a whole nother family out somewhere else, a whole bunch of kids, a whole bunch of different baby mothers or whatever, and it happens. It happens because women are just so, they are impulsive.
Yeah,
and
they forget. They forget something, all right? I get told all the time that most women only orgasm from clitoral stimulation. Well, that doesn't require penetration, does it? And if his orgasm requires penetration, well, you've got two hands and two holes that don't get pregnant.
Right.
Right? So...
It's more than two. I mean, some of them are not really viable holes, but I get you.
Yeah, if it can fit in those other holes, then he might be too young for you. Right? Like, especially your ear, that's tiny. But seriously, just to make the point, it isn't necessary for vaginal penetration to happen for both partners to have their full range of sexual pleasure. Unless the woman has vaginal orgasms, and then you still can have the clitoral orgasm without penetration. Mm-hmm. So that's bullshit. Like, what argument she's making about when she said about women having morning sickness and 500,000 women gaining 40 pounds, which is also, I gained 60. Some women don't gain very much. So that's, I guess, an average. And you don't have to, right? But all of that shit for his one moment of pleasure. Well, you're talking about condemning a child to a lifetime of poverty and the issues that happen with fatherlessness, right? Mm-hmm. Potentially being on welfare his whole life, or her whole life. Potentially becoming an unwed parent as a teenager themselves, because you wanted a moment of pleasure, right? Right? So, which is worse? Which is worse? Putting an adult at risk with their consent, or inflicting all of that on your child who cannot consent because they haven't been conceived yet? You're about to do that. She's going to shame men for their pleasure, but she's going to get hers, huh?
Right.
And that thread has been retweeted every day for 4 years. Guys, this is the way women are thinking today. They don't care that they're shaming you for what they feel entitled to. They don't care that if they don't take responsibility, it's their children who suffer. They don't care that they are not being honest about their agency. They don't care that they're insulting themselves. They don't care that they're taking away from your right to a partner who has equal accountability for the act that you guys are about to engage in. They only care about that moment of pleasure. And they want that moment of pleasure to be as uncomplicated for them as humanly possible. They don't care if they make it complicated for you. So she's going to talk about writing a book. She wrote a book, according to her. Let's see. Right after the tweet went viral, I was approached by a bunch of publishers that wanted to turn it into a book, and I couldn't see it. Then someone posed the question to me, if Twitter had an edit button, would you change anything about the thread? I immediately said yes. I know where people get stuck. I know where there's new updated data, where the link I shared no longer works. That was the trigger for me to write the book. I know how to explain and expand on my tweets. So she really wrote the book because women liked what she said. Not because she was trying to inform or change society or anything like that. And the process, the next question here says, what was it like to actually turn a viral tweet thread into a book? I'm not going to read her answer to that because I don't care. The thesis, the next question. The thesis of this book is really in lesson 13. That men are the cause of and responsible for all unwanted pregnancies. How did you come up with that? What triggered that specific argument? And she says...
She got triggered.
Yeah, she got triggered. I was reading statistics in probably early 2018 of how many abortions there had been for that year, and the numbers surprised me. They were higher than I thought, and I was like, why am I surprised by this? Maybe because you thought better of women until you read those numbers.
Right.
I feel in my core that women are very aware and careful of their bodies. So she disqualified the whole statement with the first two words. I feel. So what? I feel doesn't mean anything. It's not evidence.
Facts don't care about your feelings, even if it's in your core.
Yes, in your core.
Right.
But that's just it. She wanted to believe women were careful. So it must be men that aren't. She says, there's a sense from women that we're not eager to get medical procedures like abortions, so why are we having so many? Well, some of you are having 4 before you turn 18. Then immediately I was like, oh, I know why. I know exactly why. Birth control is super hard. And I was saying this as someone who had 6 babies and got to choose when to have them because I used birth control. But I hated birth control. I hated it. I would have mood swings, I would have breakouts, I hated the maintenance, besides what it was doing to my body. I had all these young kids. How am I supposed to get a yearly exam just for birth control? I had little kids and I was moving a lot. I needed a new doctor, my insurance was changing, and I would have to start the process of getting a prescription all over again. It was such a pain. But it works. So that part I didn't hate.
I have to wonder if she regrets having all these children. Because complaints about birth control and abortion don't usually come from women who've had 6 children.
Yeah.
Like, have you really ever used birth control? When did you find time for it between the 6 children?
Oh, jeez. Well, there's another secret about birth control. At least the specifically the pill, because this doesn't work with the non-hormonal types of birth control. The pill works by tricking your body into thinking it's already pregnant, so it doesn't try to get pregnant anymore. It doesn't drop any eggs. You're not fertile during that time. It sort of puts things off, right? But then when you stop taking the pill, your body goes through the same kind of oh shit moment of like, okay, I'm not pregnant. I was pregnant yesterday, but I'm not pregnant today. Oh, we must have lost the baby. And then it goes into high gear. And it's like, all right, now we're going to be super fertile. So if you want to time a conception, it's perfect to be able to use the pill to trick your body into thinking it's pregnant, and then also use a barrier method to make sure that if you screw that up, the semen's not getting through, so the sperm's not there to come into contact if you happen to drop an egg, here and there during that use. But, and you do want to double up specifically because if you let that hormone drop in your system that the birth control pill is giving you, your body thinks that you lost a baby and starts trying very hard to make up for it. Well, when you stop taking the pill is the perfect time to conceive. You stop taking the pill, your body goes into high gear, and if you want to conceive a baby at that time, you like do the horizontal bop every night, maybe a couple of times a night, just to make sure, and you will get pregnant if you can. Right? Unless you are infertile, unless there's a problem, unless he's infertile, whatever. That's a pretty good way of making sure of when you're going to conceive, and that's probably what she did. But I'm sure she probably only used birth control pills. But the thing is, there's lots of things. Can you imagine? Let's apply this to things that men do for their families, because birth control is something a woman does for her family, right? You do this not just for yourself, not just to prevent yourself from having morning sickness and gaining weight and having to go through labor and all that stuff. You do it so that you can time the conception and birth of your child so that it's after you've gotten things ready for the child to come along. That you make enough money, he makes enough money, the household is stable, you know that you love each other and you're dedicated to each other and you're going to raise the child together, you have a support network, those kind of things. That's the reason that you use birth control, to make sure that you're not having the baby before those things are ready. Right? And that's a thing you're doing for your family. You're not just doing it for yourself. That's for the child. Right? What do men do for their child? They drag their ass out of bed every day and go to work. Some men drag their ass every day out of bed and go to a job that is just absolutely boring as fuck.
Or soul crushing.
Yep, soul crushing. Their boss hates them, treats them like shit. Their industry is, they don't feel like they're accomplishing anything, whatever. Some guys go to work every day and risk their lives because they get paid more doing a job that risks their life than they do standing behind a cash register upselling candy bars, right?
Yeah.
Some guys are responsible in order to support their families. They take on responsibility for 350 employees at a manufacturing plant and all of the liability that goes with that. And then women complain that they make more money than the people who work on the line in the factory. Right? Some guys go to work every day and get shot at. And they're not necessarily all cops.
Yep.
Like that men do that for their family, and they may hate it. Right? They may absolutely hate their job. They like the paycheck. They like seeing their family benefit from the paycheck, so they do it. And they don't whine about it. They don't complain about it. They don't even complain when they get injured. Right? They don't blame somebody else for it. They don't say women need to pick up, the slack and how dare women. Like, they even made room for women in their industries. They invented things. Men invented things for, women to make our housework easier. And I'm not scrubbing my laundry out on a rock in the river behind the house. I have a washing machine. I don't even have to do like my great-grandmother had to do, where she plugged it in and it boiled the water using electricity, and if you touch the water, you get shocked. Nope. I can close the lid, push a button, and it does all the work. And then I don't have to hang up the clothes. I can dry them in the dryer. It's great, right? Men invented that. Men invented all those things. Men invented, your electric stove, all of your appliances, all of the things that you use that make it quick and easy for you to do the chores that you complain about all the time. And yet, women bitch about having responsibility to decide what gets into their uterus and whether it gets to live or die before it gets to an egg to fertilize it. So she goes on. After saying all this about birth control. Oh, it's such a pain. I'm a victim of the choice to use hormonal birth control. We don't ever talk about that. We act like it's super easy. Like, I'm just going to stop at the pharmacy and pick up my Band-Aids, Neosporin, ibuprofen, and a pack of birth control pills. So, why would we have abortions when we don't like medical procedures? Because birth control is awful for a lot of women. Inaccessible, too expensive, and it's not great on the body. And again, she's talking about birth control as if only birth control pills exist. She's ignoring all the other things.
Reminder, the only form of unilateral male birth control is a vasectomy. And you want to talk about that effect on the body. It's not just that it's not irreversible, but a vasectomy is a form of quite invasive surgery. It actually involves chopping tubes. And a reversed vasectomy is even more of an invasive surgery. And like I say, that's the only thing a man can do that he doesn't have to disclose to the woman he's having sex with. Mm-hmm. So don't give me that shit. And then there's the problem of sperm, once they get to the cut part of the tube, burying themselves into the other cells in that area and causing all manner of I don't know if immune diseases is the right term, but they like I say, the science isn't in on it, but when the sperm go wandering through the cells of the other body, God knows what they can do. This is why Vagisil is... Wait, am I getting the right thing? I keep getting Vagisil confused with
your basal gel. Basal gel, yeah. Vagisil is, I think, a cleansing thing that you don't really... There was a
South Park episode.
Unless you don't really need it unless your pH is off.
I need to make sure I get the right word whenever I say it. But yeah, Vasil gel would be the equivalent. It would be the equivalent of any of the let's say 11 forms of birth control that women can have. Yeah. If only men could just have a simple injection of something that shreds the sperm rather than just blocks it off and sends it haywire into the body to run amok. It's, you don't appear to have heard any of the nightmare stories of what can happen to men after a vasectomy.
Well, for one thing, like if you have an immune response to your sperm, that can cause an inflammation throughout the whole area, but it can also, like, if it gets into your bloodstream, that's the whole body inflammation. You're talking everything from arthritis to heart attack can be caused by that. So bowel disease, that could be a big can of worms.
It's worse than the pill. I mean, complications from vasectomies are a lot worse than complications from the pill, but they're probably rarer.
Yeah, they might be. Your body responds to things that it thinks aren't supposed to be there. So it would make sense. Your body expects your sperm to go out through the urethra and be gone. And if you put it into the tissue surrounding the vas deferens instead, then that's going to confuse your body, and that's usually when an immune response happens because of that kind of, like, your body doesn't expect that to be there. An immune response, you basically would have, it'd be like an allergy, honestly. It makes very much sense that would happen.
I wonder if that's what happened to. There's a NFL player. I won't for for a company involved. I won't call him a football player, but he's an NFL player. I want to say it's Keyshawn Johnson.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't think that might be him. But anyway, this man has multiple. I'm talking about like 8+ kids, and then he said he went and got a vasectomy, and then I think it was like 6 or 8 months later, oops, his wife is pregnant again. So, I don't know if that's what actually happened, or maybe he lied about getting the vasectomy.
Did they medically confirm that the vasectomy versus, because it can happen, this can happen with you getting your tubes tied too. It's why the fishy clip was invented. But they don't do that with it. It'd be a lot more difficult to do something like a fishy clip with the vas deferens. It's not. For one thing, it's smaller than the fallopian tube, but yeah, that it's possible to create a pregnancy after a vasectomy. It's possible for sperm to find their way through, and it's also possible for it to undo.
I think what's more likely was that she's a trifling hoe, and she just went and got knocked up by somebody else and made him claim it. But that's
the other thing. Did it go along with the meme where the vasectomy doesn't prevent pregnancy? It just changes the color of the baby.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Oh,
I am a horrible person, and I'm not gonna stop. So there you go. Like, just to be blunt, no woman is ever gonna just trust a guy to be the only prevention if she is intelligent, reasonable, and responsible. And so any woman that makes this argument, like if you are dating somebody, guys, and you hear this argument come from her that this woman is making, run fast. Because this is a woman who will never take responsibility for herself through her entire life. When you get married, she is going to get credit cards in your name and run them up. And then when you guys have to declare bankruptcy, she is going to blame you for not earning enough money. She is not going to be careful raising your children. She is not going to treat you with dignity and respect. She is not going to love you. She is going to use you. So don't date a woman that makes this kind of argument. It's fair to date a woman who says, I'm going to use this type of birth control and I expect you to wear a condom because I don't want to trust just one thing. It's not good to have a woman making this kind of argument that men are responsible for pregnancy and women are not. And this thing, she goes right back and forth here. Oh, condoms! The contrast was so clear. Condoms are free. Well, sometimes. If you have access to a clinic.
When the fuck are condoms free? Will a doctor prescribe you condoms? What the fuck?
No, there are clinics in some parts of the country in the United States that will give them away for free, if you ask. But actually, most of the time, there aren't. So, but she goes on, they're readily available. You can get them in vending machines, you can get them on store shelves and all that. And that's true, they are readily available. So are other female forms of birth control besides birth control pills. I can walk into, there are 4 pharmacies in my neighborhood. Now, I live in a city. When I lived in a small town, there were 4 pharmacies in my neighborhood. Actually, and I'm counting my neighborhood here as about the size of that community. Like, we're talking maybe a 2-mile radius, right? Far enough you can walk anywhere in a 2-mile radius, unless you have mobility challenges, and then maybe not. But a healthy person walking 2 miles should be nothing to a healthy adult. At least if you're healthy enough to be screwing around, right? And I could go to any one of them and find spermicidal foam, spermicidal gel, spermicidal film, which is a barrier method like the sponge. I can find birth control sponges. I can find, I can get information on a diaphragm, even if I don't find a diaphragm. I can go to my doctor and get fitted for a diaphragm, and I don't have to swallow anything to use it. Right? And of course, the absolute most free form of birth control, wherein you can swallow something, is not to use your vagina for sex. But some women do have a tough time swallowing that.
Yes.
How many times can I fit swallow into this sentence, guys? So she's talking about condoms are free. Well, oral sex is too. Condoms are in vending machines. I will say this. I am leery of vending machine condoms. Like, even if I wasn't allergic to them, because most of those are just the plain latex kind, I don't know how long they've been in there. I don't like that. I would want to get one off the shelf and
I mean,
examine
Jesus
the box
Christ.
and all that.
I've bought food from the grocery store
And
that
there's
was
condoms.
expired. No, what?
Oh.
No.
There's condoms at the grocery store too, by the way.
No, well, yes,
Yeah.
there are, but I've bought food at the grocery store that when I took it home, well, actually, I don't know if I did it at the store or actually got it home, but the food was expired.
Oh yeah,
And
I've
it's
had
sitting
that
there
too.
on the grocery shelf. Like, you have to pay attention to that thing. You don't just. There's no such thing as trust and believe.
No, not if you don't like food poisoning,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, so for birth control, like she's talking about hormones, where there's actually a variety of options available for women that don't require you to swallow a pill or get a shot or use any hormones. And then she's complaining again, oh, men hate condoms. And that got her exploring the topics of the thread. So then Black asks her, you wrote this book really calling on men to step up. How has your husband responded to this? Now, notice, we haven't heard from the husband himself. So she's going to speak for him.
He's locked up in the basement, chained to the bed. He's a little bit busy right now.
He's probably locked up in a job, chained to the work. But she says, he's probably my biggest advocate. He calls himself my first convert. He got it immediately. He was looking at our marriage going, whoa, why did I wait to get a vasectomy? By the time I wrote this, he's had a vasectomy for years. He was like, I wasn't really aware of the side effects. I wasn't aware of how difficult it was for my wife to get birth control. Oh, he was talking about her side effects. I wasn't supporting that, and I should have been. I could have made the appointments for her. Dudes, if she didn't ask you to do that, don't do that. And if she did ask you to do that, ask for the request in writing. Because, like, you making doctor's appointments for your wife is a good way to get accused of abuse.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's fine if you guys have that relationship, but, geez, oh, Pete's. I could have made the appointments for. I made my own doctor's appointments from the time I was 18. Actually, I made doctor's appointments before that. From the time I started driving, really. I could have made it so she doesn't have to take off work. Or I could have arranged childcare. Which, the same thing, I guess. But, for crying out loud, why does he have to make it so that she doesn't have to take time. Why is not that her responsibility?
Right.
Like, if I needed to arrange childcare for my kids so that I didn't take off time off work, I just got together with my friends who had kids my son's age, and we traded time with the kids. You know, he can be at your house during this time, and I'll take your kid at my house for this amount of time, and that it was settled. Like, that's not difficult. Anyway, so yeah, he's supposed to take responsibility, but she isn't. I say in this thread, you think women would be mad at men about this, but none of us were taught to think about this. So I can't be mad at him because I wasn't thinking about it either. This is a cultural phenomenon. Except, there isn't anything to be mad about, is there? Why would women be mad that men don't take unilateral responsibility for women's choices? Unless women were sociopaths.
Well, exactly, because then they want to be able to blame them for when they make the wrong choice. They have to, it's I believe the legal term is plausible deniability. They want what they want until the point where they can blame someone else for what they did, for the consequences, and then pay for the consequences of their actions.
Yeah. And we get told when we argue this on social media or in person with other women that use this argument, it's men are 100% responsible for unwanted pregnancies. We get told that this is about both people being responsible, not about shifting the burden to him. So now I'm going to read the next question. I'm going to ignore the what do you think men should be taking from this book question, because she answered that in the thread.
Well, and the answer is toilet paper.
Yeah. The interviewer says, how does shifting the burden of pregnancy prevention from women to men factor into the conversation around abortion? So this woman, obviously, this interviewer obviously took it that way. And that's, I think, most of the women that liked what she said took it that way. Blair doesn't correct her either. She says, as far as the abortion conversation goes, my argument takes the emotion out of it. So many people want to debate me on when life begins and when it's murder. These are philosophical and religious conversations. So I'm going to say no, they're not. When life begins is biological. That's scientific. It's not philosophical. And it's not religious. Right? When it's murder is an ethical question. That's more philosophical. But it's not necessarily religious.
The jury is still out on exactly when a non-human... a supposedly non-human collection of cells becomes a fully fledged human collection of cells.
But it's still a scientific question.
It is, but it's given that it doesn't have a definitive scientific answer, we're left with philosophical and religious conversations about it. But we can say 9 months is too old, and we can say 1 day is perhaps not too old. Between those two is where we get it, and I'd love to hear where Blair thinks that divide might be, but I suspect it's towards the upper boundary of that thing.
It's hard to tell. I don't know what the Mormon religious outlook is on abortion, so that might affect. Like, I was raised Christian Union, which is it's an offshoot of Southern Baptist. So if I were to just strictly look at it from a religious perspective, I would have to say that all abortion would be murder. And if I look at it from a more scientific perspective, well, I described that. I'm not going to go through all of it because we'd need a whole show to discuss it. But I wrote a blog post about that years ago, breakingtheglasses.blogspot.com, and the argument is actually linked in the sidebar on that blog. It is a page instead of a post, and it is on the topic of abortion. And that's my main argument is, we should have at least some consistency in how we approach when it is acceptable for a human being not in a position of authority, because a citizen is not in a position of authority under our law and policy, to terminate the human life of another living human organism. That's it. I don't want to go beyond that in this discussion, but simply put, if we're going to say it's not okay to shoot your neighbor for a particular reason, then you have to come up with an exterior reason, an external reason or whatever, an additional reason why it has to be okay in utero. And I went through the whole, this is what an organism is. This is what scientifically determines whether you're human or some other species. This is what determines whether you're living or non-living, whether you're dealing with a non-living thing or a living thing, I should say. And when you combine those three sets of information, you get a conclusion that becomes applicable to law and policy. Now, my own personal position is there shouldn't be a government, so that throws law out the window, and it becomes an ethical question for the individual at that point. Like, are you okay with shooting people, for instance, to get rid of them because they have a disability? If you are, you might be more okay with abortion than I am. But yeah, so there you go. And
it becomes a question of when it becomes human.
Yeah.
And that's I certainly don't feel qualified to answer that question. I mean, every cell in a blastocyst is a human cell, so you could say a blastocyst is a human. And that's when it gets complicated, and I'm gonna duck out of that conversation that I just started because I'm not qualified because I'm a man.
Well, being a man doesn't disqualify you, but there are people that'll say not being a biologist disqualifies you, but I call bullshit on that because they teach us about that stuff in elementary school. So, which is again why at 13 I hadn't formed the excuses for abortion, and I was able to see through the bullshit much more easily. I didn't have the clouds in front of me that you get when you get older as a woman. I think women hit peak maturity at about 14 years old and then go downhill.
Which is
like that makes me more radical than Reddit's red pill forum.
Considering how mature the average 14-year-old girl is,
it's sad.
Bear well.
It really is. Like, and I'm talking about today's women. Like, if you talk about women 150 years ago, there was a difference, especially if you're talking women that were, maybe in more pioneering areas of the country where there was less urban closeness and stuff, and it was all, you had to depend on the people around you, and you had to be reliable and stuff like that. Then maybe they matured their whole lives. But I don't think that's the way it is for modern women. I think modern women really do stop maturing at about the age of 14 and go downhill from there. They certainly never are faced with the level of responsibility that an adult man is faced with. If I, for instance, at 14 years old, if I had decided for my life, I am going to find a guy who will allow me to exploit the fruits of his labor for his whole life while I never earn a penny, and I get a free roof over my head and clothing and vacations and whatever else that you pay for as a couple, nobody would be like, oh, you're a deadbeat, right? But if a man did that, I'm going to find a woman and be a kept man. I'm going to find a woman who will pay for everything and I'm not going to work. The minute a man does that, people are like, oh, you deadbeat, what's wrong with you? You can't support your woman? Something's wrong with that. You know, even a guy that's going to be a stay-at-home dad, right, is expected to have some iron in the fire somewhere, right? So only women are exempt from that. And only women are exempt from being financially responsible, being good stewards of the man's income when they do that. Right? If she wastes his money, nobody criticizes her for that.
They'll call him a fool for allowing her to do it too.
Yeah. Or a poor earner. He's not earning enough. He can't support his woman. Right? Mm-hmm. But if a guy marries a woman and wastes her money, then he's a deadbeat. He's a moocher, right? Like he's effeminate. He's emasculated. Like all these things. Not because we don't think that dads are important as a society, but because we do think that the male provider role is important. And honestly, you know, a few hundred years ago, when we didn't have all of the amenities that we have today, and we didn't all live in close proximity with each other, having one parent stay at home while the other one went to work was absolutely necessary. You know, or at least if they didn't run a business together. Like some families, everybody ran the business together, especially farmers. Like everybody worked on the farm. Farm wives were not just homemakers, right? They did farm work, and the kids worked on the farm, and they had a trade. They knew a trade when they grew up. They could be farmers. But it doesn't make sense today. For like, I live in an apartment with my husband. It would not make sense for me to be a homemaker and only a homemaker in that instance, right? We didn't have a business together. Our son didn't grow up learning a business from us. We did have close proximity to people that we could trade childcare with. That it was not a kid being dumped into a childcare system. It was visiting with friends and family and then having them come and visit us. Right? It's perfectly fair to expect the woman to hold up her end of the finances in that situation. And yet, our society treats women like that expectation is unnecessary. Women are exempt. Only men are obligated. So, yeah, the maturity thing. This is why, honestly, all these women liked what this woman posted. They don't have the maturity to value other people's recognition of their personal agency. If someone thought that I didn't have the capacity, that it wasn't my fault when I didn't plan ahead before I got pregnant, if someone thought that was all my husband's fault, that's an insult to me. Mm-hmm. Right? That's telling me that I'm going to have to go through life traipsing merrily along with no attention to the potential consequences of my actions, just being victimized over and over again by my own stupid choices, and watching my family be victimized as well. Instead of figuring out, hey, you know, I could have done this better, and if I do this again, here's how I'm going to improve it. I screwed this up, and then the consequences are affecting my family. Here's how I'm going to work to mitigate those consequences, so that they don't have to suffer the consequences of my stupid choice. That is agency. Even if you didn't exercise your agency properly when you made the dumb choice, having the agency to recognize that it was a dumb choice and you're not going to make that dumb choice again, and that it's on you to make up for it. It's on you to fix it as best you can. Like, that's that's part of being an adult. You're not an adult if you don't have that. So these women are insulting themselves very deeply, and they don't even realize it.
When when a woman is in labor, like in the most painful part of the labor process, and their husband or the man who got them pregnant is by their side, holding their hand, mopping their brow, and such, it's kind of a cliche at this point that at some point they will turn to their man and yell in their screechiest voice, "You did this to me! Fuck you! You did this to me!" And that's fair enough. When they're in the process of labor, you can allow them this kind of contingency because they're in a quite distressed
Situation, yeah.
But if they extend that beyond it into the future and indeed into the past, you don't get that contingency anymore once the pain is over or before the pain is over. No, you don't. We have sympathy for you, ladies, during those moments of the pain of childbirth, because we will never experience that. But if you extend it beyond that, I mean, there's only so far you can extend it beyond that before we go, hey, all right, you're not in hideous birth pains anymore. You did this to yourself. I didn't rape you. Nobody raped you. At some point, you have to be like, yeah, I did this to myself. And it sucks that human beings have the largest heads by ratio of pelvis of just about any animal on this planet.
It's to make room for our damned egos.
That's nobody knows what came first, the large brains or the large penises or the large vaginas. But evolution has attempted to compensate for whatever came first.
No.
And there comes a point where you're like, you got to experience what you had to experience pain for up to a couple of days. But if you're going to make men experience not a similar pain, but a pain that goes on for 18 years, like I said earlier, the worst thing a woman can experience is a couple of days of labor, and they have epidurals and all manner of drugs to help them through it. But you're able to make a man work for 18 years to support this child of yours. I mean, of his. I mean, the child that he didn't want and somehow created. And yet, men don't get drugs to get them through 18 years of hard labor. Well, they do, but all of those drugs are illegal and expensive. So can men get some sympathy, perhaps, for what they have to go through? Not because of biology, but because of the legal system. I know feminists love to ignore the legal system when it suits them, and they love to ignore biology when it suits them. But this whole fucking thread is a good example of women ignoring what men have to go through legally because of what women have to go through biologically. And they don't. By the way, they can still get an abortion. Abortions have not been made illegal because of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. It's just that states can no longer be forced to make doctors perform an abortion.
Yeah, and they're looking at trying to change that with federal legislation now anyway. So we'll see how that plays out. But in terms of agency, what really gets me is she's not recognizing female behavior here. Now let's look at this next paragraph. So she's talking about her argument taking the emotion out of the abortion argument, and that placing the onus on men removes the discussion about the procedure and the ethics, the philosophy, the religion, whatever, and places it on prevention. If we talk about prevention, it removes all emotion. as if we haven't been talking about prevention for years, because the prevention that we were talking about was women's ability to prevent conception. Like, she talks about it like that conversation never happened. That conversation has been ongoing for as long as prevention and abortion have both been available. And that's before birth control pills existed, right? You can prevent pregnancy without ever touching hormonal birth control. And so this idea that it's on men and it's not on women, I don't think that changes the conversation at all. Because when I argue with women on social media about this, one of the first things they talk about is how birth control can fail. Now, they still make the argument about men irresponsibly ejaculating, right? But they'll say condoms can fail. So their argument is that when sex happens, the man shouldn't ejaculate. I've run into that over and over again.
Oh,
It doesn't take the emotion out. It brings the mean girls out.
Yeah. How the hell do you make that happen any goddamn way? I mean, once you're there, there's no turning back.
Well,
To quote,
most guys aren't into the whole tantric holding off thing, so...
to quote Billy Connolly from one of his routines, the withdrawal method is at the point of ejaculation, withdraw, and he's like, there isn't a pack of wild horses that could make my ass go in that direction at the point of ejaculation.
Mm-hmm. And then it's a dumb argument anyway, because there's such a thing as pre-cum. There's all kinds of reasons why withdrawing at the point of ejaculation doesn't necessarily prevent pregnancy. No matter which direction you're going, right, the substance is going forward, and if it comes out with any force, withdrawing's not going to keep it off of her flesh. Only one has to get in. It's unusual for that to happen, but only one has to get in, and that's all it takes to form conception. So, yeah, her argument is shit. And, she's like the whole rest of this. I'm not going to go through every aspect, but she's... nothing abortion opponents are arguing for is actually reducing abortions. It's because women have no agency in society. Women are not accountable for their actions. If women were held accountable for their choices and were not given the sympathy of... you need to have this abortion because this pregnancy was inflicted upon you, then we would have a better situation. If you want to talk prevention, teach women, teach girls in special or in sex ed class, teach girls that they have all kinds of methods of birth control, and they can say no, and they can use a different hole. They don't have to get pregnant from sex. That's it. And teach them that it's their responsibility to determine what goes into their uterus and whether they allow it to live long enough to fertilize an egg. Right? She says, "Oh, I've experienced pregnancy and I didn't enjoy it." That's irrelevant.
Did it again. I did it over and over again.
Then it's on you to prevent it.
Yeah.
Right? If abortions go down, it would also signal that men are not treating women's bodies so casually. Women who complain about this really, really surprise me. Do you know the reason that you view him as treating your body casually? His treatment of your body is not the only casual treatment, right? You're saying he treats your body casually, but everything that he thinks is okay is because you treat your body casually. If I'm a cop, right, and I go into high crime territory, get into a gunfight with criminals, and I get shot because I didn't wear my bulletproof vest, it's my fault that I didn't wear the vest. Even if it's their fault they shot me, it's my fault they had access. It's your fault semen gets into your uterus. Even if it's his fault that he stuck his dick in your vagina, it's your fault that he had access. As long as it's consensual sex we're talking about, it's your fault that he had access. It's your fault the semen had access. It's your fault that you didn't kill it with chemicals in your vagina or just outside the cervix, right? Those are things you can do. You chose not to do them. That bugs the shit out of me. Stop blaming somebody else. And that's basically her take. I'm not gonna. The rest of it, they're getting into the religious stuff. I don't want to get into the religious aspect of it because, in my opinion, because we're talking about an American making an argument in an American debate, religion doesn't matter. Religion is not allowed to inform our law and policy, so I don't care what her religious outlook on this is. My biggest concern is she's defining femininity and she's defining womanhood without making part of the standard for being a woman having adult accountability. What differentiates us from little girls? Is it the fact that we grew tits? Well, I had a friend in school that grew tits when she was 8 years old. So she sure wasn't an adult, right? So it's not the fact that we grew tits. It's not that we got taller. It's not that we got curvy. What differentiates us? What makes us adults? If not accountability. And yet, women, and I've never seen anybody work so hard to avoid accountability as modern women. So there we go. That's my take on this. Do you guys have any anything to add? Any questions? Any thoughts? Because I'm not going any farther in the article.
It's late and we're tired.
Okay, that's a good answer.
Wrap it up and don't stick your dick in crazy, guys.
Yeah, and it's late and we're tired and wrap it up.
Don't let
sound
crazy
like good.
anywhere near your dick.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That is true. And if you don't know what crazy looks like, it's the woman that made this argument.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way. That's what crazy looks like. So with that, let's get into the super chats. We have Sour Vodka gave us $2 Australian and said, "Family court is so biased against men." I copied that twice. That means I missed one. I'm going to go back to see if I can see that one again. Okay, so we have beyond that, scrolling back down. There we go. Yeah, there's family court. So the next one, Sour Vodka gave us $2 Australian and said, "Appreciate the women badgers, absolute MRA." And I think we appreciate you as well. Thank you very much. Sour Vodka gave us $2 Australian and said, "More PET shelters than for men regarding DV." I'm not sure what PET is. Then we have Master Rogue gave us $5 and said, "I possess memories from my time in the womb, so life is definitely in the womb." And then let's see.
How I would love to.
Yeah, I know. I would love to hear what that was like. That's an interesting type of... Like, I possess memories from when I was 18 months old, but it's because I had a near-death experience, and trauma fixes things in your head. Like, you remember those.
I've had trips where I felt like I was in the womb, and that I was experiencing past trauma.
Yeah.
Do people get PTSD from being born if you remember it hard enough?
I would
Probably-
argue that people do
probably
have
not.
PTSD from being circumcised.
Well, yeah, but it's not the same as being born.
No.
If everyone
no.
got PTSD from being born, we'd all be as fucked up as a army veteran.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see. We have. Oh, let's see. Yeah. No, Shaman King, I'm not that tired, but these guys might be. I didn't work all day today. I slept for like 3 hours today. And pet as in animals, Eric Bruner says. That's possible. This was capital P-E-T, and it's in Australia, so I don't know. Richard, this is from last week. I missed a super chow from Richard BR last week, so I'm going to read it today. He says he gave us $5 and said, remember when they used to have the grocery bagger Olympics, where one contest was to pack a bag which would be cut away, and the best scores were to the package arrangement that wouldn't fall over upon removing the bags. That was on television. I do kind of remember that. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And I mean, you can make anything into a competitive skill, and when you do that, it makes men want to work harder at it. So that's kind of a neat thing, in my opinion, because it gives the boys. It was mostly underage and like college age guys that were doing that job. So let's see. Today is the 31st. I'm scrolling and scrolling because there's been a lot of super chows, and that's good. Let's see. So today at 7:50 or at 7:05 p.m. is where I'm going to start because, yeah, there we go. There's where he says done. Meredith G gave us $5 and said HBR Talk 275, honey for the badgers. Telemnar gave us $100. Thank you very much for that, Telemnar. And says that story from Lauren of the young man who was going to be potentially irresponsible and possibly face legal consequences reminded me of something. I know, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. I think it's Emile, E-M-I-L-E. Emile Durkheim came up with. The difference between mechanical society and organic society. In mechanical society, people are self-sufficient. They do not live in close communities, and therefore force is needed to keep society functioning. So laws are brutal, public, and rely on frightening the individual into complying with social norms. In organic society, people are more socially integrated and work together more closely due to more complex economics, i.e. industrialization, requiring close collaboration, so people have to be nice to each other because we are economically dependent on each other as opposed to living on a bunch of isolated farms. And laws are, quote, nicer, focusing on repairing damage and more on effects on individuals rather than community. He thought society was going from mechanical to organic due to population growth and more complicated economies. However, in my opinion, it looks like we're going from organic to mechanical, at least for men, by using the state to take men's wealth and give it to women, and incentivizing family breakup. The law punishes men harshly and publicly, even for doing nothing wrong, nominally for the benefit of the community. He wrote this back in the 1890s. Feminism and the welfare state had yet to really take off. It breaks this process because if you have access to excess welfare, you do not have to work together with others, just complain to the state. That's an interesting take. And it does fit the way men are treated. In terms of responsibility for any reproductive choice, any butt hurt over a breakup, anything like that. It's like our society exists to punish men for failing to satisfy women.
Yeah.
Sleepy Aussie gave us $5 but did not leave a message. And that's the Super Chows. I have had let's see here. Yeah, the Rumble thing was closed, so let's look at that real quick. See if there's any. And it's not showing me any paid comments on Rumble, any paid rants. Although there's Mangaka92 says, "Teach men not to coom," in quotes.
Good luck with that.
And Oi Kanawi says, "Damn, memories from the womb, that's intense." Well, Master Rogue has clarified that. Basically, it was very orangish red. All sound was muffled. I tried to analyze my surroundings to figure out where I was, and I saw a hand's shadow and wanted to hug it, in a nutshell. So it sounds like momentary memories. And that sounds about right for what it would be, because there's some evidence of, although depending on how far along, I mean, that sounds like a later term for light to be able to get through so you could see color. I don't know how much light would be able to get through. But I will tell you, my belly stretched when I was pregnant to the degree that it was really weird. It was all forward. So if you looked at me from behind, you thought maybe I gained a little weight. Not very much. And then I would turn sideways, and I actually had people that hadn't seen me in a while. They'd see me from behind, and they'd be like, "Hey, Hannah!" And then I'd turn around, and they'd be like, "Whoa!" Like, "Whoa! What's going on with you?" And then I'd be like, "Well, yeah, I'm about 8 months." But yeah, and there's been video in utero that shows the orangey red colors, but I think there's a light source inside that causes that. Master Oak says, "I also try to kick my surroundings to investigate it." I swear to you guys, when I was pregnant, my son was in there playing soccer or basketball. Like, I was never still. But anyway. So that's all the super chats, and super duper communications that I am aware of. I don't think I've missed any this time, because I started at done and went to the last one. So I'm going to type done in here. And I'm going to thank everybody for listening. Thanks to my two co-hosts for sticking out this long and very badly seasoned sausage. The article was badly seasoned. I think that we got pretty spicy. Well, at least I did. We got pretty spicy in our discussion. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.
Yo.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.